With introducing today's presenter, Matt Inman. And many of you know Matt. He's been a presenter in many CX conferences and written white papers and has really been established as authority in the CX industry. So here at MaritzCX, he leads our CX consulting group. And basically what that means, among other things, is that he's responsible for helping our clients develop customer experience improvement roadmaps. And many of you know that prior to joining MaritzCX, Matt was Director of Customer Experience and Satisfaction at American Family. And he was with AmFam for 6 years, and during that time, he successfully developed and led customer experience strategy and programs for the company. So he brings that client-side perspective and expertise and insight to the table when helping design CX programs for clients. So his education includes a master's in marketing research from AC Nielsen, from the AC Nielsen for marketing research at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, go Badgers, and a bachelor's degree from Luther College in Iowa, which is the home of the Fighting Norse. And yes, Matt, I did have to look that up. And he was recently awarded the Customer Experience Professional Association Impact Award. And he was just one of 4 CX suppliers to be awarded that globally in 2015 by the CXPA. And he also speaks Spanish fluently, so quite the overachiever. And so with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague and favorite Luther College Norse alum, Matt Inman.
Thanks, Tom, and nice to see that you looked up my alumni mascots as well. So. As Tom said, my name is Matt Inman. I've been with MaritzCX for about the last 3 years, and American Family for the 13 years prior to that, where I started and led the customer experience function there for the last 6 years that I was there. So what I wanted to start with today is start by talking a little bit about the role that I had when I was working in the financial services side. So back when I was running customer experience on the client side, it was kind of a different world than what I see here now that I'm on the consulting side. So when I was at American Family, I had a team of about 18 people when we first started off. And I always kind of cringe a little bit when I say that because what I've noticed is that now that I consult with most organizations, 18 would be really unusual. An average customer experience function at most companies is somewhere between 1 to 3 people. Now, the reason why we had a lot of people back then was there was a very strong commitment to customer experience. But we also had large teams because there was a lot of things that just couldn't be done back then that you could do today. We spent a lot of time working with IS, trying to get sample taken care of, getting things set up so that we could get our reporting done. We did a lot of paper and phone surveys. A lot of that stuff has gone by the wayside since then. We did planning for the entire organization around customer experience improvement efforts. Lots of manual creating of reporting and doing presentations all over the organization, leading a lot of the improvement efforts. And probably the biggest thing is just trying to keep the entire organization engaged on a regular basis. It felt like that was kind of something you were always working on and trying to convince everyone. But the challenges that we see specifically within financial services kind of go beyond that. What you see in financial services is it's not so much an issue of whether or not they've got the data. Financial services tends to have more than enough data. You've got very robust VOC programs. You've got information on all the activity that they've had with your organization, when they've been to your website, if they've been onto their account, if they've called into the care centers. You've also got their spend levels, the renewal rates, the share of wallet. So there's no limit the amount of data that you have within the financial services space, probably more than any other industry that we work with. But some of the challenges we see with that is that the data is fairly unconnected. Meaning that most organizations we work with, they always say, oh, we've got these really legacy systems, and we just can't get all of our data to merge together. It just takes too much effort, that sort of thing. As a result of that, there's fairly limited insights. So the insights that you gather tend to be limited to the single source of information, or maybe a couple of sources if you're able to get those together. On top of that, and this isn't specific just to the financial services, but declining response rates. People get bombarded all the time with survey requests, but in addition to that, they're also getting plenty of marketing material that tends to drown out your request to get information from them. And then organizational engagement, which I mentioned before. trying to get the rest of the organization to actually look at customer experience as being a real strategy for the organization to succeed versus just kind of this nice-to-do sort of thing. But when it comes right down to it, they feel like they need to focus on the growth and the retention and see customer experience as kind of this, effort on the side. So to kind of reinforce that, we did a global study about a year ago, and the global study was over 5,000 different organizations where we tried to figure out what are the organizations doing that make them really strong at executing on customer experience. And I'm not talking about the customer-facing efforts like, they pick up the phone quicker or they contact their customers more often, but what are they doing inside their organization that makes them really effective at what they're doing? Now, when we looked at financial services in particular, the places where we really saw financial services doing well was collecting good voice of customer information. So you notice that I mentioned before that there's no shortage of information. Financial services, in addition to all the information you've got on your customers through your operational measures, also has a very robust VOC measurement program in place normally. On average, there's about 6 or 7 different sources of VOC information that you get from transactional surveys, relationship surveys, social media, care center feedback. Financial services tends to have a really robust VOC program. They also tend to do a very good job of having well-documented and applied customer processes. So any of the processes that are customer-facing, they document them well and they apply them fairly consistently. And a lot of that might just be due to the regulated nature of financial services. Third, good governance, and this is a relative measure because this is a figure that's still growing, but relative to other industries, financial services tends to have a higher number of chief customer officers, and not just chief customer officers, with just kind of the status, but also with pretty good authority and resources. So they actually have some authority to be able to make changes in the organization and the resources to make those take place. Whereas we'll see in other organizations, somebody has that title, but when it comes right down to it, they don't have a whole lot of influence within the organization. They also tend to be making fairly significant investments in customer experience, and their senior management does a pretty good job of communicating the importance of customer experience to the organization. Now, on the flip side, what are the things that are really kind of holding them back from moving forward in the customer experience space? Well, the first of these is what we kind of mentioned already, is that they've got a ton of data. They just have a really hard time getting it all together so that you can draw insights between your financial systems and what your customers are telling you in surveys or in social media or your care centers or whatever other source of information you have. Customer feedback still is not being integrated well into the decision-making process. So customer experience and research teams are getting the information, they share it out with the rest of the organization, but it's not necessarily being embedded into the decision-making process for decisions that will impact your customers. There's basic follow-up with customers, but not a consistent approach. And when I talk about follow-up, what I'm referring to is things like case management or hot alerts that whether it's through social media or through your surveys, you identify that there's a customer who's dissatisfied, which you translate into being an at-risk customer. Not real structured approaches to being able to address those at-risk customers. Low levels of access to customer feedback, and this is what I'm going to address a little bit later, but the information that's collected by CX departments still tends to reside within CX departments, and they'll share it out in reports to senior management, things like that, but it's not getting widespread visibility by the rest of the organization. Moderate level of organizational belief in the importance of CX, and this is something that's consistent across a lot of industries. The organization will say, yeah, we know the customer experience is really important to us, but you know what? We've got some profitability issues we really need to focus on first, or we got to focus on retention or growth right now. They're not seeing the linkage between customer experience, customer satisfaction, and the way that it impacts the other areas of the business. And then finally, senior management's decisions reflect the commitment to the customer. So you'll saw the last bullet on the areas of strengths was that senior management does a good job of communicating the importance, but the employees of these organizations aren't necessarily seeing that the decisions that they're making are reflective of the importance of the customer itself. So let's move on a little bit of what some of the innovations are. So when I was going through the innovations that we identified, the ones that I think quickly come to mind were like, well, it's got to be a lot of big data because we hear about that a lot, and the latest analytical techniques that they presented at the latest, AMA forum or social media. And the reality is they're not the biggest tech innovations that have been out there. While they're certainly important and they have their place, they're not the things that are driving your ability to run an effective customer experience program as much as some of the things that I'll identify. Big data in particular, while it gets a lot of publicity, most organizations that we work with just aren't quite ready to be able to use it yet. And a lot of that comes back down to their ability to integrate the data. Financial services companies are probably one of the best industries to be able to do something with big data because they have so much of it. But it's the lack of integration that prohibits them from being able to go down that path. And for that reason, I kind of left it off to the side. The latest analytical techniques, while they're really interesting to see what they can do, the greatest insights can really be derived from much more simplistic approaches to things. In social media, especially within financial services, while it's very insightful, 95% of the social media feedback that you pick up on still tends to be kind of that that neutral type of sentiment that goes along with it. Things like, you know, hey, I have to stop to the bank today to pay the mortgage, or I'm going to go see my insurance agent today. Things that just, you know, they talk about what they're doing with their day, but it's not really the kind of sentiment that you can actually use as an organization to make changes. So here are what I identified as the latest CX management innovations. And while I'll go through these things, each one individually, I'm not going to read through them right now. The thing that's kind of the underlying framework for all of these things is they're connected to enterprise feedback management systems. And if that's not a term you're familiar with, this is the platforms that organizations use to be able to report out, to survey all of their customers in their VOC programs. Now, historically, a lot of organizations were doing their research and they would do all of the reporting manually. Then they started to move towards more online reporting systems, but most of them were custom built. Where most organizations are moving towards now is getting into an enterprise feedback management system where they're very robust and you can handle a lot of the different activities that you want to be able to do with your customer experience program in one place. And I'm going to go through these things in fairly quick order because there's not a lot of time, but I just want to be able to give you enough of an overview of what these things are that if you hear it and you're like, hey, that's kind of cool, I think I'd like to learn more about that, that you connect with whoever you work with as a partner for a lot of your CX data needs. So the first of these is data integration. And this is specific with internal metrics. So a lot of organizations are used to having their VOC programs with the results of this posted up on an internal site where they're able to see the performance, they're able to track it over time, maybe do some cuts by geography. But as we start to move down the path of trying to integrate the rest of the data, a good EFM platform will also allow you to be able to start to bring in some of your other operational metrics. So if you want to be able to put in with your VOC results, put in what does our retention look like, how does that trend with our satisfaction scores, if you've got operational metrics from your care center, you know, your response times, how often are we reaching out and touching our customers, getting all those metrics that you know really drive that customer experience into a single location so that everything is integrated, at least visually together for everyone who wants to be able to use that data. Next on the data integration side is integrating with external tools. And what we've got is there's a whole series of these, and this is just a sampling of these, is how do you take the information that you're collecting from your customers on their feelings about the experiences that they're having with your organization and keep it so that it's not just tied back to your VOC program, but integrating it into the rest of the organization so that they're starting to think about the experience the customers are receiving and utilizing it differently. So Salesforce, one of the biggest, if not the biggest CRM platform in the world. How do you start taking advantage of, you know, knowing that if you're going to be contacting one of your clients and you've got their information in the CRM program, also integrating what you know about their satisfaction. So if you're going to be calling on a customer, wouldn't it be great to know that they just gave you a perfect score on your last satisfaction survey that you gave to them, that they might be in a great position to actually start to target for a cross-sell opportunity. Or on the flip side, if they just had a transaction with you that went very poorly, they had a poor experience within the care center, payment was misapplied, maybe they were in the insurance space, they had a claim that was denied, that's great information to know before you contact them. And you might look at them and say, hey, you know what, maybe we want to suppress these people from some of our marketing campaigns, or if they're calling into the care center, great for somebody to know the experience that they've been through recently. As you start looking at some of the other things with Oracle and Adobe, where you start looking at the connections back to all of your website feedback, knowing how much time they spent on your page, knowing how long they spent on there. Again, if you can start integrating that into your VOC, you get a much more robust picture of the experience your customers are going through. Tableau, I'm going to show you an example of here on the upcoming slide, but Marketo is a marketing application where you can start to integrate all of your marketing campaigns that go out to your customers, whether it be direct mail or email or SMS. Trying to identify or at least filter out your customers, again, those who have had certain experiences, making sure they're getting certain messages versus those who maybe have not had a good experience, making sure that you're giving them a different message, and then you start to increase the effectiveness of your marketing campaign. So again, the importance of this is you start to get this integrated into other areas of the organization, such as your direct marketing, your advertising, your digital areas, so that they start looking at the VOC as being the source of information to help them make better decisions versus customer experience being this other department that's kind of off on their own. So here's another, just some illustration of what you can do with the Tableau. Tableau is this data visualization tool that you can use, and it allows you to start putting data from different sources side by side. So on the left side here, looking at Net Promoter Score and the renewal rate for an organization, so you can start seeing the statistical connections between these data, so that again, people start looking at the relationship of customer experience and the business outcome, not as being mutually exclusive, but being tied with each other, so that customer experience starts to become part of the conversation for the rest of the organization. And on the right, it also allows you to do a lot of graphic display with the data, so you can start doing some heat maps, whether geographically or otherwise, to be able to identify where your opportunities are. Next to this is mass customization of VOC results. So I had mentioned earlier that one of the challenges or one of the barriers within financial services is making sure that you've got mass access to the information of what's going on in a VOC program. So in order for people in the organization to truly want to be a part of improving it, they have to regularly see, how is my organization performing, where are we doing well, where are we not doing well. The EFM platforms make it really easy for just about anybody in the organization to have access to a platform, and they can customize it for what's most relevant for them. You can either do it through hierarchy, meaning like in a single sign-on, when they log on, they only see the information that's automatically relevant to them. And it also allows you to put filters in place so that if you've got somebody at certain levels in the organization, they might have access to information that people at different levels of the organization really don't or shouldn't need access to. So it allows you to make the information relevant to whoever the audience is, and expand the access to this well beyond what you would have been able to before, so that people readily understand how's the organization performing and where are opportunities for improvement. Next to that is data collection management, and I throw this in here because while it's not one of the sexier elements of innovation, it's really important, and it's one of those things that for a lot of customer experience and research teams, it takes up a lot of your time. And getting this right is really critical, especially nowadays where we run into challenges with fatigue management, where customers are getting bombarded all the time. You really want to be able to do things that when they receive your message, they're more likely to respond to it. So in this case, this is an example of making sure that when you're pulling your survey, you're pulling it from your customer databases, you're putting filter criteria in place, so you're saying, hey, look, I only want people that have been with us for at least 6 months, they've got certain portfolio values, a certain amount. You can run it through other databases. So in this example here, if somebody recently had some type of an insurance claim, or if they've got something else that has some legal implications to it, there might be some cases where you say, hey, look, we really need to filter those people out and suppress us sending this survey to them for now and holding them later. By putting it into an EFM program, you can do a lot of your programming up front so that it's automated moving forward, and all those criteria and those rules are automatically applied for you versus you having to do fairly manual work generally with your IT groups, which can be fairly cumbersome to acquire those resources and have it happen on a regular basis. In addition to that, then on data collection management is the fatigue management. So again, putting rules into place so that you know that you're not going to be contacting that customer more than once, and you pick your rule for whatever you want it to be. Relationship surveys, very common that organizations wouldn't contact the same customer or household more than once every 12 months. Transactional surveys, if somebody calls into a care center, common that we'll see organizations say, hey, look, if they call in on a regular basis, we don't want to bother them, or we don't want to connect with them on a survey more than once every 6 weeks or so. So these allow you to put those rules into place to make sure that when they see your email or your request for a survey, that they're not automatically hitting delete because they receive these things to you from you all of the time. And the more complex your program, the more different touch points where you're trying to collect this. So if you've got it from a billing area and a care center and people that are on the digital platform and your branch offices, making sure that all these rules are combined together so that even if you have multiple different surveys going out, they're all accounting for the volume that they might be receiving in the same rule set. Next to this is it's kind of giving you a little bit of this understanding of really kind of where the market's going with your survey responses. So this is what we've been tracking over the last 4 or 5 years now, just getting a sense of how many of the surveys that we're sending out in an electronic fashion are being responded to on a PC versus a mobile device nowadays. So, even just 4 or 5 years ago, it was pretty much all the responses were coming back via PC. Nowadays, when we're doing that, we're seeing under half of all the survey responses that we send out in an electronic fashion actually being responded to via PC. The vast majority of these now are being responded to in a mobile platform, whether it's your phone or it's your tablet. And what we're also seeing is an increase of companies that are starting to send them out via text. Now, it's not quite as common in the U.S. because we've got a little bit more strict regulation around the use of texting. But in a lot of other countries, specifically within Latin America, they've got a little bit looser regulations around that, and we're seeing more and more collection take place via SMS platforms. But nowadays, knowing that more and more of your customers are going to be responding or at least accessing your surveys via mobile device, it's really table stakes nowadays that you have to make sure that your surveys are mobile optimized so that when they pull it up, they don't have to do, kind of that expand thing so they can even see what the questions look like, because the likelihood that they're going to respond to something if they have to go through that type of an experience is very, very low. So minimum table stakes nowadays, making sure that you've got mobile optimization of any survey that you're sending out to your customers. The next is geocoding, and this is kind of one of the more exciting things, but also gives people a little bit of nervousness too. So geocoding is organizations being able to tell based off of the satellite frequency of your phone where you are at that given time. So this is where a little bit of that big brother creepiness kind of creeps into these sorts of things. But this is for organizations to be able to say, hey, look, we know that you just walked into Target right now. Are there certain coupons that we would want to be able to flash to you that are relevant that we might not have been able to get to you otherwise? Where they're starting to use this on a customer experience side from a survey and data collection is mostly on kind of the application side. So think about it if you're on an airline or you check into a hotel and you've got their mobile application. They're likely to know, okay, this person just landed. What better time to ask them about the experience on their flight than right now versus sending them an email in a few days where, it's buried with other things. There might be some recall issues or something like that. So they're trying to use this to put the survey in the moment better than what they did before because they're taking advantage of where you are. And it also allows them to connect their data back to what they know about them. They know what time you checked in. And I'm going to show you another example when we get into some of the advanced analytics, also taking advantage of things on your flight, like, hey, we know your flight landed 30 minutes late. We knew that you guys took off an hour late because of maintenance issues, trying to connect all that information in so that they get better views of what the customer is going through and a better understanding of their decisions. The next is journey mapping, and this is not just journey mapping, but a specific tool for journey mapping. So journey mapping has been probably one of the more popular different techniques for organizations to be able to identify what does that end-to-end experience look like for our customers, from the moment that they decide that they have a need to the shopping experience, to the purchase, to the using of it, and then the renewal or leaving the organization. What we have here is a tool called CX Workout, and it's a digital way to be able to build the journey out. So you can build out in a fashion where you see the steps of this being built out, live in front of you. You can do your sub-steps, your actions, and things that go along with it. And the advantage of being able to do this is several-fold. One, it allows you to make edits on the fly, whether it's while you're in a workshop building this thing out, or even better, if it's been 6 months or a year since you did that, and you look at the typical kind of static journey, to be able to update those things on a regular basis. one of the top complaints that we hear from organizations is, hey, did journey mapping, loved it, it was great insights, but you know what? After 12 months, it was kind of out of date, and people stopped paying attention to it. This is a tool that allows you to continue to update it so that it's fresh. As you've identified and addressed one of your pain points, you can take it off so that it's fresh with what's the true experience looks like, and allows you to add things to it. The other thing that has an advantage with it too is that for organizations that are geographically kind of spread out, but they really want to make sure they're getting the involvement of a diverse set of the organization, it allows you to do some of these workshops or get the input in a virtual setting. So for organizations that geographically are all over the country, but they don't want to pay to everybody come in for workshops, or for the organizations that are global in nature, it allows you to be able to do a virtual workshop or give people access to the tool, and they can go in and they can make their updates and add their input into the map as they go through it. It also allows for you to be able to look at the different stages of the journey, and then below it, start to put in what you already know from your satisfaction scores on, hey, we know what the steps of the journey are, but how are we performing in those areas? What's the satisfaction look like for that? The other aspect of CX Workout is the collection methodology. And this is where it really becomes a rich collection tool. So as you've gone through the journey and you've identified areas that you want to learn a little bit more about, maybe it's because it's an area that you're doing really well at and you want to understand the customer's perspective of why you're doing well, or maybe it's an area that you know you've got some particular pain points and you need to be able to understand that a little better, is they've got the opportunity for you to do digital collection through what are referred to as missions. This means that if I'm an airline and I want to get information on the check-in process, because we know that's an area we're not performing very well, you can send these things out to people's mobile devices saying, hey, look, we'd like to know a little bit more about this, ask them a couple of questions that they can evaluate on, and then you basically give them the opportunity to give you a response with a digital response where they can videotape or record themselves, or they could do it in audio setting. And the advantage of that is twofold. One is that in some cases they can show you the experience that they've gone through. They can show you the product or the service that they had some challenges with. The other thing that it does beyond what you would normally get through traditional journey mapping approaches is that you're able to get kind of that facial expression. You're able to feel more of that attitude and emotion in what they're saying versus when somebody's showing you a transcript or somebody's sharing you a summary of what you heard from your customers. Now, the advantage of this is great from the perspective of being able to get that, but where it becomes even richer, and this goes back to one of the challenges that I referenced before, is that getting the rest of the organization engaged in this. Showing people in your organization as you walk them through the journey map, saying, hey, look, this is an area where we're really having some troubles, but you know what, let me show you a couple of videos where a couple of our customers talk to us specifically about the experience you had. The richness of those videos really go a long way for being able to embed the memory of what that experience is like in the minds of the rest of the organization. So it's a very rich way to be able to collect the data, but also to be able to impart that data to the rest of the organization. And when you go into the journey map, you can click on those videos at any time, at any point within the journey to see what helps describe that step within the journey. Next is integrated action planning. So this is another one of the challenges we see frequently is, you spend a lot of time collecting a lot of information. You work really hard to get the insights. You try to push it out to the rest of the organization, and then frequently you're thinking, is anybody doing anything with this? Integrated action planning is starting to take the efforts of making sure that the actions are connected back to the data and putting it in the same place where people get access to the results that you're collecting right now. So as an illustration, if you look at kind of that top screenshot there, looking for priorities for improvement, if you're looking across your scores and you say, gosh, knowledgeable staff and post-sales follow-up, we look at the score that we're getting relative to the rest of our geography. These are some areas where we're really down. We're really behind where the rest of the organization is. This is something we should be acting on. You can go about this a couple of ways. You can immediately click on Create the Action Plan right there. So if it's somebody who's in a frontline location saying this is something we need to work on, they can create an individual action plan. Or if you have a little bit better governance structure in place, an organization can go through saying, look, we're going to go through our prioritized opportunities and we're going to create a more robust action plan on here. The nice thing if you're in a CX management role then is it allows you to go in and see what are the action plans that have been started, who's the owner of this, what other targets are shooting for, and when do they think they're going to be able to finish this. So it puts you in a position to be able to manage the customer experience improvement efforts in a digital way versus having to spend a lot of administrative time trying to track these things down or just wondering if anything is taking place at all. As you take that forward, this is just a couple of screenshots, which are probably a little bit of an eye chart for you, but it shows you that there's structure behind them. So when somebody's filling out an action plan, it's not just, hey, we're going to try to increase the knowledge of our care center representatives. It puts some rigor behind it so that people are being thoughtful about, okay, do we understand what the problem is? Do we understand who we need to have on the team, what the root causes are, what we're going to do about it, what our timeline looks like, so that you can have this tracked in a way that people are going to be approaching things more prepared than they would have otherwise. And then in a CX management role where it becomes really most useful then is you've got these reporting tools in place where you can track how many different efforts do we have underway right now, what stage are they at, and it also puts you in a position so that when senior management's saying, so I know you guys have got the results coming in, what's going on right now, what are people doing with it, that you've got some reports immediately accessible that you can share with them saying, yeah, let me share with you what we're doing about it right now. We've got about 15 different initiatives. They're at these different stages. Here's who the owners are. It puts you in a position to really help engage with senior management a lot better than historically would have been able to. The second to last is integrated case management. And this isn't so much a new tool. It's been out for a while, having some type of a way to be able to identify customers who are at risk, because when they respond to the survey, they tell you that they're not satisfied with some aspect of their experience, or you're collecting it through some other means, whether it's a care center or social media or something like that. What this allows you to do, though, is collect all that information, put it into a single tool, and make sure that you've got some type of a triaging going on so that when you've identified this, you know it's going to somebody who can address this actively, and then for you also be able to monitor, was the customer followed up with, did we resolve their situation in a successful manner that will leave them satisfied. So again, this was something that we just didn't see very high integration or penetration within the financial services space. So this is one of those things where you can use the VOC information that you're collecting and you can make an immediate impact on your customers readily and track that pretty easily to see what the impact is. And the last of the innovations that I'm going to bring up is specific to integrated analytics and advanced analytics. So this is trying to take advantage of, if you've got all of this great information within your platform, how do you take it to that next level then and say, okay, beyond just being able to track my current performance and how am I trending, how am I able to start deriving insights with this versus having to pull it off into some sort of Excel or delimited file and then have somebody with some statistical software go through and try to identify really where the insights are at. Well, there's some great tools now. This was referred to as Spotlight, where you can go through and you can specifically pick, hey, what are the measures that I want to be able to identify? So in this case, if you look in the green text right now, they're saying, let's see, of the people that say they don't really appreciate our relationship very well, and they're also saying they don't receive updates from us on a regular basis, what does their relationship look like with us from a churn perspective? And you'll see just below that there, basically they're saying, hey, people that don't appreciate your relationship and they're saying you don't do a great job of giving them updates, they're 3.5 times more likely to churn than customers who don't fit that profile. So the ability to do this allows you to start profiling who are at-risk customers and why are they at risk with us? What are the aspects of the relationship that they told us about we know that are driving them to be at an at-risk status with us right now? And then it allows you guys to start to go back into your action planning saying, okay, we know that this is a problem. How do we get to the root cause of why these things are happening, and how do we start an action plan that's derived specifically from this? So again, allowing you to take the information you have and empower you to be able to identify the insights readily within the platform. And the final illustration I'll give you of the integrated analytics is start to look towards more predictive analytics. So instead of always looking in the rearview mirror saying, gosh, we know that we didn't do well this last quarter and it's because we did a poor job of getting back to customers, or first call resolution was really down, or satisfaction with our branch operations just wasn't very good. This allows you to start taking that information that you do have, integrating it with your other information, and then start making predictive decisions in advance. So the illustration I'll give you here is that the drawing on the left, that's supposed to be kind of the hull of an airplane. And the illustration here is that, you've got a full flight, most of them are nowadays, and you really want to be able to, get the sense of what was the experience with everybody that was on the plane, all 100% of the interactions. But you don't do that because you don't want to over-survey people. Maybe people have been surveyed recently. So you solicit feedback from maybe 30% of those people. From there, you get about a 4% response rate. So now you're down to, literally maybe 1% of all the people who actually interacted with you. So instead of having to live with this, concern that, okay, how do we know we're even getting feedback that reflects what everybody else is going through? How do you start to integrate that with other information you have? So I started to allude to this a little bit earlier, but if you know that we've got satisfaction results from people on that plane, how do you start to merge that together with, okay, we know that they had a 46-minute departure delay. The round-trip airfare cost them $389. They're a loyalty member at a silver status with us. It was a 42-minute flight, and through all of the other things that were on there, what was the weather like? What was their arrival time? Did they find their bags, or did they not make it? That sort of thing. And start putting all that stuff together so that when you start getting your feedback from your VOC program, you can start to predict what their scores are going to be based off of the information you're collecting on 100% of all of your customers on a regular basis. And it allows you to start to build those models so that even if your response rates aren't complete or they're low or declining, that you can start to predict where your problem areas are going to be and address them, not just by the 1% who are giving you the response, but by everyone else who was in there. And on the flip side of that, it allows you to be proactive too with your marketing communications. So we talked a little bit earlier about how do you integrate this information back into other areas of the organization so that your customer experience insights help influence the way that you interact with clients or customers in other ways as well. So if you were in an airline example, wouldn't it be great if the next time somebody called in or the next time they booked a ticket, you were able to address them and acknowledge, that, hey, we're very sorry that last time that you flew with us, you had a 46-minute departure delay. We strive to do better for that. This time just the acknowledgement that that you didn't do or you didn't accomplish what you were trying to the previous time goes a long way for being able to tell your customer, hey, we know you, we know the experiences you've been through, and here's what we're trying to do to address it. So a lot of opportunities to be able to take advantage of the insights you have. So in closing, the way that I wanted to position this, and a lot of this comes from all the different organizations that we work with, as well as the experience that I've had in running a very large program, is that you need to think about your roles in customer experience management. It's not about having to run the research and the reporting and planning the actions and executing the improvements and all of the other administrative things that go with it, because that really needs to be the role of the entire organization. If you're keeping customer experience management consolidated to the customer experience team, as an organization, you're really never going to be able to see the progress you want, because it's just plain and simply too big of a job. And if the rest of the organization isn't engaged, you're going to have a hard time being able to, kind of move the ball downfield, because you're going to run into people that are saying, hey, look, that's my area. You can't come in and make those changes. What you really need to do with the limited resources and roles that you have is you need to manage the process for the entire organization and enable everybody else so that they can improve the customer experience. So you need to be the hub for identifying what are the insights, how do I make sure everyone in the organization has access to that, how do I identify what are our top priorities, make sure that we've got actions that are taking place on this, whether it's at an enterprise-wide opportunity or whether it's at the individual customer level. How do you make sure that all of that stuff is flowing and you're managing the customer experience process for the organization, but not all of the individual efforts that go into improving that? And there's other things that go with it too, such as establishing governance and things like that. But what I really wanted to focus on in this webinar was really what are the tools that are out there right now that will really help you become a lot more effective and efficient with your efforts, given that you probably have teams that are pretty strapped to begin with, and make a much bigger impact for your entire organization versus where you are right now. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Tom. And Tom, if you've got any questions that have come in, maybe you can read those off for us then.
All right, thanks, Matt. Great content, great presentation as always. The innovations in CX, they just continue to progress very quickly. So it was nice to have some of this kind of condensed and called out and explained So thank you for taking the time to put that all together. And I'm assuming that if any of our friends on the webcast today want more insight, you only touched on these 10 very lightly, but due to time. But if they want to get more insight, I'm assuming they could reach out to you via your email here, your phone number, give you a ring, and get you that way, and with additional questions and insight. Yeah, so let's check out some of the questions that did come in today. One, can you clarify the difference between case management and integrated case management?
So you can have them separate from each other. So case management, you could have that come from a single source of information. So you might have a survey program that's set up, and when you identify somebody who gives you a score below, 5 or below, or whatever your threshold might be, depending upon the scale, that automatically can flash up as something that you want to be able to go after. Integrated case management is where you start to integrate the data sources across other sources of information. So you can do that a couple of ways. One is you might be pulling in information from your care center where you've got some opportunities, your social media, consumer affairs or something. Basically, you're trying to keep everybody in the organization on the same case management system so that you can kind of streamline your approach to it, versus maybe having two different areas of the organization approach it differently or contact the same customer on that. It also allows you to maybe bring in some of the profile information of that customer. So when you conduct a survey, you might have fairly limited information on that customer. It allows you to maybe bring in some of their background information you have on the account for that person.
Great, thanks. So can any of these tools that you referenced be used in a pilot type format for an organization? This individual says they're going to be rolling out a VOC survey, and they really like the integrated approach that you pointed out here.
Yeah, so for organizations that are thinking, hey, I kind of like this, could we at least put our toe in the water first? Yeah, I mean, I think for organizations, especially if you've got multiple different listening posts or different surveys, do the integration with a single survey first. The hardest part is just getting it set up at first, and then once you get it, get the data connected so that it's all feeding into the same system, it all becomes pretty streamlined after that. So start with a single measure that you've got in place right now, and really leverage that one. And then as you feel successful with that, then expand that out to collect your other sources of information. And I know I mentioned surveys a lot, but think about other sources of information too, where you're collecting feedback from your customers, whether it's social media or information from your phone centers and things like that.
Okay. The next question, kind of a general question. What do you see as the greatest challenges in the CX space right now?
So the biggest ones that I see, they're a little bit connected to some of these innovations, but they tend to be a little bit more, I guess, systematic for the organization. And I'll name three of them, and they're not in a particular order, but I see these coming up being the most challenging. The first of these is financial linkage. So one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that organizations frequently will look at customer experience and will say, hey, this is important and all. We really do need to take care of our customers. Gosh, we put it in our mission statement and everything, but we really need to focus on our operational improvements now, or we need to focus on profitability or growth. And it's because they're not seeing the connection between your customer experience efforts and scores and how that impacts the business. So financial linkage it's basically a statistical approach that allows you to connect. If we improve our NPS score or we improve our satisfaction score by this much, what kind of a financial impact does that have on our organization? And the importance in doing this is it allows customer experience professionals to start to speak the language that the senior leaders really are used to hearing. And if you can start saying, gosh, we think that if we implement this improvement effort, and we're going to take our company score up by 3 points, and based on our modeling, that's going to be worth $70 million to the organization. Now you've got their attention. Now clearly you have to make sure that you're bringing them along and they actually buy off and finance or whoever blesses the model that you created. But once you've done that, they'll stop seeing it as being a mutually exclusive, kind of nice to have sort of thing, and really seeing it being critical into the success of the organization. The next of these is governance. So customer experience teams, as I mentioned early in the call, frequently tend to be fairly small, and they've got kind of limited authority. So to quote a CEO that I spoke with at one point, he says, I look at the CX team and they're an area that have this enormous responsibility, but they have zero authority. And every time I mention that, people are always like kind of laughing, you know, half-heartedly and shaking their head, because that's the life that they lead. Is you have to put a governance structure into place so that you don't have to have authority over all of your operations to do this, but you have to have a structure in place so that you're identifying the opportunities for improvement in a prioritized fashion, and you've got some type of a senior level governance in place that allows you to be able to work across the organization and get approval that those areas have to be accountable for the improvements. And it's not intended to necessarily be kind of, you know, carrying the stick around sort of thing. There's certainly a little bit of carrot and stick in there, but it's creating that governance so that you don't feel like you're always trying to, you know, push the ball uphill, that you've got the organizational support, and it requires you to do appropriate planning and things like that. And then the last, and we touched on this a little bit, is action planning. Putting a process into place so that when the insights come out, people are getting the results and they're taking action on it. And sometimes it's not so much that other areas of the organization don't want to do something with it. In some cases, it's they look at the results and they're just not sure what to do about it, or how do they go about doing this sort of thing. And this is where it goes back to the customer experience team really needing to be that function that enables the rest of the organization to do what they need. And if you're in kind of this centralized function with appropriate governance in place, having the process in place so that you have access to being able to put forth the case, the business cases for when resources are needed, and having an executive oversight team that is aware and has the ability to be able to provide those and be able to remove roadblocks for you as well. So making sure that the organization is not only getting the insights, but they're taking action on it, and they're empowered to be able to do so.
Awesome. So you touched a little bit, a lot on technology advancements. Are there other innovations out there that you've seen that folks can use?
Yeah, a couple, and these will feel a little less tangible, but I think they've been really important. I think the creation of the CXPA, the Customer Experience Professionals Association, has been really good for this space. I know they've been around, and I'll probably get it wrong, but 7, 8 years now, and I was in the organization when they first started. They've really come a long way. I think it does a couple of things. I mean, it really gives a voice to this industry, and it gives a great sounding board for people to be able to find other people that are in the same spot, in some cases maybe to commiserate with the challenges that they go through, but also to identify solutions and resources from other people in the same space. So I think it's been great for being able to do that. The other is kind of this creation of a chief customer officer, or whatever variation of that you want to create. I think the more organizations do this and they actually look at this as being a senior level function, I think the more credibility that the customer experience space has in the industry, but specifically within the organization. So think of any organization that would go without having a chief financial officer, or chief information officer, or chief marketing officer. They've got that level of visibility and credibility because the organization truly believes that drives the success of the business. Having a chief customer officer has been something that has been growing rapidly. Trying to get more authority within those positions, I think, is still an opportunity. But I think that is one of the better innovations that has taken place. And I think a lot of that is also just a reflection of the acceptance of the impact that customer experience can and is having on organizations.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about how fast the innovations are coming on and how the industry's changed so fast. What would you predict the future of CX innovation? Where do you see it going?
So for the nearest term, I think it's the continuation of data integration into systems. So even though there's a lot of great tools that are out there, like the platforms that I shared here, that allow you to integrate a lot of this information, most organizations still have a long way to go to be able to do that, getting that information. Because up front, it's hard work, getting access to that information and getting it integrated in. But once you go through that, the ability and the capacity to make change is dramatically better than when you've got all that information separated. So the tools are there. Now it's just getting greater adoption within organizations to be able to do that. And then the other is, I think, because customer experience as a discipline is still relatively young compared to other more more structured disciplines, finance, accounting, IT, marketing, and that sort of thing. I think you're going to see more and more structure and discipline to come into this space as they mature as a function. In the early days when I was doing customer experience, I remember feeling like, okay, I know what we're supposed to accomplish, but I really have no idea how we're going to get there, because at that point there wasn't case studies. There was really no roadmaps out there of how other organizations had done it, at least organizations that were established. There was always some good case studies, Zappos and the like, where they started off a new company and the owner was such an important influence on the fabric of what that organization was about, that those were some. But for organizations where they've been around for a long time and you've got a lot to overcome, there just wasn't a whole lot of roadmaps out there to be able to figure that out. So I think you're going to see a lot more structure and discipline to the approach as this becomes a more function and more mature discipline in the marketplace.
Got it. You had mentioned, or one of the slides you had data from the CX maturity benchmarking study. Can you give a little bit of insight into that, the study?
Yeah. So what we did about a year ago is we conducted a global benchmark study to figure out what is it that makes companies that are really successful in customer experience, what are they doing that makes them successful? And when I say that, I'm not referring to like what you might see in kind of some of the industry ranking studies like J.D. Power or Forrester or Temkin or something like that, where the customers say, gosh, I love USAA better than the alternatives, or Amazon, or pick your bank or whoever. But it's trying to figure out, okay, great that they do a better job of connecting with their customers and they feel like their people are more knowledgeable and they're faster with the response time. But it's looking inside the organization saying, okay, so what are they doing inside that organization that allows them to deliver that better customer experience? And we looked at a lot of organizational design materials trying to figure out what are the elements that make organizations successful in the way that they function. And then we catered that specifically for customer experience. And the areas that we looked at were everything from the culture, not only the belief, but the commitment, the role of senior leadership, communications in the organization, structure and governance, the quality of the VOC program and the analytics that go along with it, the type of processes, how are they designed, how are they executed, and how consistent are they, other things that relate to the hiring and the training, really comprehensively trying to figure out what are the things that really make that organization successful. And from there, then we use this when we help organizations build out a roadmap to basically evaluate the organization. We say, okay, Bank ABC, here's how you guys are doing on all of these different aspects of customer experience management. Here's how that compares relative to the banking sector. So they can say, hey, here's how we're doing. How are we relative to others within the same space where we compete? But then it also shows you how you're doing relative to the global average across all different industries. And then finally, and what's really most critical is, how do we look relative to organizations that are in those upper tiers of maturity that are really successful? And when I say successful, defined by their customer experience program actually leads to quantifiable business improvements in their retention and their financial performance. And then we use that to be able to develop a roadmap on what you're doing. So when we talked earlier about people in the financial services industry tend to be really good with the amount of data they have access to. In a lot of cases, it might be that, hey, your VOC program is really strong right now. Where you really need to focus on is developing better action planning or getting better governance into place so that you guys can get better leverage off the efforts that you've got going. So it's trying to identify across the organization, beyond just the VOC program, what are all the other things we should be thinking about in managing in order for us to be able to see the success that we need in our customer experience efforts than maybe what we currently have our focus on or have any role in at this point.
Great. Thanks, Matt. And just to plug, you can learn more about that study on MaritzCX.com, as well as take an assessment, a CX assessment to kind of gauge, as Matt said, compare where you are, where your CX efforts in comparison to others in industry and outside of your industry. So it's very cool. It's a very neat tool that MaritzCX has if you want to go to MaritzCX.com and just look at the CX assessment test. So Matt, that's it. That's all the questions we have, and I want to thank everybody on the line and joining us on the webcast today. Thank you for your time and attention, and you know, again, we appreciate it very much. And we be on the lookout for an email from MaritzCX, and that email will be a recording to this presentation. And again, you can also find that on MaritzCX.com if you happen to lose that email. But thank you very much, and we appreciate your time, and have a great remainder of your day.